session 2 of my conversations with Bill and Christine, my friends from the early West LA Vineyard days, late 70s, early 80s. And one thing you'll see about Bill and Christine is they have stayed the course. They have hung in there. Bill has been a mentor and friend and teacher, and his day job, by the way, is teaching tennis. When I was 17 years old and I came into UCLA as a first-year student, Bill was teaching tennis. Bill is still teaching tennis today. And a couple of years ago, he won the award for the best teacher in the entire 300 teachers of all kinds of intramural sports in that campus. But they have given their lives to all kinds of expressions of loving God and loving people. That's the worship life. Music is the easy part. Loving people, forgiving people, staying in relationship with people, being in a mentoring relationship is something you'll see coming out in this session. Christine's a beautiful example of playing worship music 24/7 in her house. So if you want to have a long life of loving God and loving people, just listen to the example of my friends here. One thing I didn't mention about Bill and Christine and their background, they both have a background in acting and in singing, and Christine has directed a nonprofit organization that took teams of youth to different countries. She was the director of that organization for 30 years. She had 2 children. Sadly, her husband passed away. Ed passed away about 1.5 years ago, and he was such a wonderful man. And Bill, you've been a mentor, I think, to many hundreds of people, through the years. You really love people well. Mm-hmm. And obviously, I'm a person that's benefited from who you are. So when I was thinking about this time and what to focus on, I realized Bill and Christine are like the Romans 12:1 and 2 examples of what it means to be a worshiper, because for their whole lives they have been extremely devoted to God and to people, loving God, loving people. And just as we were having lunch, Christine, you mentioned it wasn't until just very recently that you were on a worship team nonstop for the last several decades, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
So it's amazing. And both of your daughters are connected to worship leading families with their spouses.
Yeah.
And then we have my kids, 8 of my kids all have been involved at one time or another in worship ministry. And so one very strong theme I see here is a whole life of worship, a whole
Amen.
Life of loving God, whether that's,
Amen.
helping a needy person or listening. Like another thing, Bill, you do so incredibly well is listening to people, and being attentive to people and hearing their story and then responding in love with appropriate advice and counsel and prophetic words and so I especially for those who are, say, in your teens, 20s, or 30s, learn from the example, of people who have just stayed the course, and lots of ups and downs, lots of challenges, lots of difficult things in life, and they just kept going. They just kept being faithful. And I don't know if you guys want to share what are some of the keys that have enabled you to just keep going on loving God and loving people. How do you last in the life of faith and in helping other people?
I don't know. I feel like worship is my calling.
Okay.
And I have worship music on 24/7.
Wow.
Even while I'm sleeping, worship music is going on in my home. And I just feel like that is what God has created us to be, is worshipers.
Yeah.
And that's how I live my life. I feel like it needs to be 24/7. And
Wow.
My life is all about worshiping and honoring the living God.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want anything to get in the way of that.
Yeah.
You know, even though I still direct large productions and people and do different performing things, I really still feel like worship is number one.
Mm-hmm.
and always will be.
Wow.
For my life.
Yeah. I thought it was so awesome. I mentioned Christine was an actor, and you acted in the very famous kind of theater life in London, England. There, way back in, was that your early 20s or something?
Well, yeah, I went there to do a Jimmy Owens musical, and I went there as a performer.
Yeah.
And then I ended up, after about 3 weeks, taking over as director.
Oh my God.
So for the whole 6 months that we were there in England and Scotland and all over Great Britain,
yeah,
I directed the show.
Wow. And so that's what you're doing now in your church, because drama is a part of their ministry.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We in the past, not so much the last couple of years. We've just been doing smaller things, but in the past we did very large productions.
Okay.
And then I would direct those large productions. And we actually had some professional actors that went to our church.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard that expression, you are what you eat? Well, that applies to physical food, and it also applies to spiritual influences. All kinds of video and what we read, what we look at. What are you looking at? What are you listening to? And with Christine, she has worship music playing night and day in her house so that the life of worship is encouraged and it dominates her awareness. It's okay to enjoy movies, but do they dominate your life? Is that your primary thing that you're feeding your soul with? Proverbs 4:23 tells us, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. So we have the ability to train ourselves in what to love. And by habits of spending time consuming God stuff, as I like to call it, videos, live experiences in church, meeting in a home group, meeting with a friend for coffee, and sharing your lives together. If that's what your life is marked by, then you will be following the Romans 12 model of, in your everyday, moment by moment activities of life, you are seeking to honor God, be a sacrifice of worship. And it shapes you, and it changes the way you think, and it keeps you from being immersed in the less valuable ways of the world. Be careful about what you consume. And these days, it's easier than ever to find good content to consume. YouTube alone is filled with all kinds of great teaching. But it's also the easiest time in history to consume things that will distract you and will crush your spirit, because all of us have a phone. It's a walking movie theater. We can consume good or bad. So it's your choice. Consume good things.